I'd like to have a look at how your blood glucose level is controlled, and I'd like to have a look at two things which are to do with it, which are called diabetes type 1 and type 2, which are diseases connected with how your blood glucose level is controlled. So, firstly, why are the levels of glucose important? Well, we need glucose for cellular respiration. You know, the whole glucose plus oxygen makes carbon dioxide and water, all that business. We need it constantly to live. The glucose is transported around your cells, to your cells in your blood. It's in your blood all the time, travelling around. However, often it gets too low. If you've been exercising or you're not eating, it's going to get too low and you're not going to have any energy. And also, actually, high levels of glucose are really quite bad for you. So we want to keep it at a medium level all the time. Now, beware when I'm talking. There's several key words. 3 of them are almost identical. If you look at those 3, the pink, the yellow, the green, they are almost identical. Glucose, glycogen and glucagon. So we're going to be just be absolutely clear. There's these 3 and you must be clear of what they are. Glucose is the sugar that we need constantly. Glycogen is basically a store of all that glucose. It's kind of like starch. It's a big chunkier molecule. It's basically lots of glucose all tied together and stashed in your muscles, in your liver, and it's just there for when you need it. Glucagon, the one there in green, is a hormone that makes glycogen break down and turn into glucose. Insulin, the famous one, the one that's there in blue, at least it sounds different, and it does the exact opposite to glucagon. The blue and the green are completely opposite. Insulin turns glucose into glycogen, and glucagon turns glycogen into glucose. Okay. So here's a totally normal person. They go through the day, they're eating, and as they eat things, their blood glucose level changes. It goes up, it goes down. After each meal, it goes up, and it gradually drops down again. Now, the reason for it dropping down again is because of this chemical called insulin, and that goes up and down as well. Now, each time insulin is produced, that makes the glucose start to turn into this other thing called glycogen. Each time there's a peak of insulin, it causes the glucose to drop. So this is how your body would like the blood glucose levels to be. They would like it to be just completely even, constantly, all the time. However, it's nothing like that. It goes up and down and up and down constantly, and if you had diabetes, it would be just absolutely crazy up and down all the time. However, most of us keep it more on a level, and it's the hormones that keep it on much more of a level. You never get it completely flat, but it's on more of a level. You've got this constant circle going around, this constant cycle of one thing causing another thing, causing the next thing, constantly. So when you get lots of glucose, your body makes insulin, and it turns the glucose into glycogen. And then when you don't have much glucose and you've got lots of glycogen, your body starts to produce this hormone called glucagon, which turns it back into glucose. And it just goes on and on and on, if you're healthy. Now, here is quite a complex diagram. I'm just showing you it overall, showing you what's going on here. I'm going to talk you through it. Just get your head around what it looks like in rough, and I will talk you through it now. So let's go. So firstly, normal person eats a meal, as they constantly do, all the time, regularly, and that causes, each time they eat, that causes your blood glucose levels to go high up, boost it up, which gives you energy. But as I say, it's not actually very good for you when you have these high blood glucose levels. It causes damage over a long period of time. So the pancreas senses that level of blood, and it senses that it's quite high. So what it does is, there's little cells inside the pancreas called beta cells, and they cause it to make a hormone called insulin. Now that hormone is basically a chemical messenger, and it goes into the blood and it sloshes around your whole body, slashes all around the place until it gets to the liver. Now the liver is known as a target organ. It's the place that the hormone goes to, and when the target organ receives it, it makes it do something. So the liver senses those hormone levels, it senses all that insulin, and that makes the glucose turn into glycogen, and it stashes it there in the liver or in the muscles, and so we go on. So our blood glucose levels don't get too high, and we've stashed some away there for the future. The right hand side of that picture, you saw how complicated that picture looked, but the right hand side is going to be the exact opposite of what's on the left hand side. It's all the opposites. It's opposite day. Let's have a look at opposite day. Person doesn't eat for a while, or they do lots of exercise, and so the amount of glucose they've got in their body actually drops. Now, the pancreas senses that, senses that the blood's going through and it's got less glucose in it, and so it makes a different hormone. We've got the alpha cells. The alpha cells in the pancreas, they make a hormone called glucagon. Now that glucagon, it travels around the body because it's a chemical messenger, and it gets into the blood and it just goes all over the body. But when some of it arrives at the liver being the target organ, it senses those hormone levels and it changes the glycogen that it's already stored and turns it back into glucose so it can be used for respiration. Now that there is a fairly complicated diagram. Now in a moment I'm going to take that away. We'll try and do it again and try and just think what goes on each one. Think to yourself what's going to go on each one. Just try and remember it for a moment. Look at it. Right, let's see if we can label it up. Oh, last thing there, sorry, all goes back to the beginning. Right, we're going to have something there. Think about what goes there. And it's going to carry on. And it's going to go on like that, and I'm going to show this picture like that. Okay. Right, starting in the top left. What's there in the top left? It is... Oops, sorry, on that last bit. Person eats a meal. Indeed. Person eats a meal. And then the brown bit, slightly below. High blood glucose levels. Indeed. And then the high blood glucose levels cause something to happen in that orange bit there. The orange bit is... yes, the pancreas sensing the blood. And that goes to the green thing. What happens in the green thing? What's the pancreas do? Yes, makes the hormone called insulin. Okay, so the brown one is something to do with the blood. I think the brown ones are all to do with the blood. So yes, it travels around until it gets to the liver. Okay. And then orange senses the hormone levels. Okay. And that makes the liver do what? Indeed. Okay, back to the beginning again. Back to the beginning, and at some point, yep, doesn't eat for a while, which causes low blood glucose, and the pancreas senses the blood glucose level, makes the hormone glucagon, and it goes into the blood, which does something like that. Yep, and then all that business. Indeed. Okay. Now, diabetes type 1 is a problem, and it's a problem to do with the hormonal system, and it's to do with the insulin in particular. Both type 1 and type 2 are to do with insulin. Now, type 1 is known as insulin dependent diabetes. Now, it's an inherited condition normally. You just get it, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's to do with your genes. Your parents have passed on a recessive gene to you, and that's the way you get it. You got it. Nothing can be done. Now, for some reason, your body can't produce its own insulin. Now, it's thought that this is some problem in some way. Your immune system has attacked those beta cells and just destroyed them. For some reason, your immune system doesn't recognize the beta cells, and they just destroy them, and that's the end of it. Nothing can be done. There is no cure. There is treatment, but there is no cure. So what you can do is you can just inject yourself after each meal. You can inject yourself with insulin, and if you manage your diet so you're not getting too many spikes and troughs, just make sure you eat fairly sensibly, and you're much better off. And up until sort of 50 years ago, if you got this, you died. That was the end of it. Since then, people got better and were able to make this stuff called insulin. Now, basically, it affects this flow diagram that we saw before because that bit there can't be done. If you can't make it, then the insulin can't travel to the body, the insulin can't sense the hormone levels because there aren't any there, and la-di-da, terrible business. Anyway, where do we get this insulin from? Well, it's a very, very complicated protein, and it's much too complicated for a person to actually make in a laboratory. So people have come up with a way of making it using genetic engineering, and essentially they get the gene for insulin from a human person and they put it into a bacteria. They do it one time. Once it's done one time, when that bacteria reproduces a billion trillion times, they're all there sitting there just making lots of insulin for you. And now once that's been done, we can just sort of harvest all this insulin on an ongoing basis, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I said you can't cure it. I suppose you can have a pancreas transplant, but doesn't really work very well, unfortunately. But we can just constantly inject and treat it with those insulin injections. Type 2 is a different version entirely. Now this is the one that's not caused by genes. It's not inherited. This is generally caused by lifestyle, and it is generally being too overweight and eating too much sugar. Not so much fats. Weirdly, fat is the one with all the calories, but fats don't cause diabetes as much. It really is the carbohydrates, it's the sugars, the glucoses that's the problem. And the problem being, the target organ receptors stop working. They get so used to seeing insulin that they just stop, they just give up. So you can control it to some extent by just losing weight, exercise, and controlling your diet and being really sensible. But it can get more serious. But generally, if you start to develop diabetes, people sort of start looking at themselves better, and they're generally all right. That one, the problem with that one is the liver, the target organ, senses the hormone, but for glucagon only. It doesn't work at all for insulin, and therefore the liver turns blood glucose into glycogen. It does not do that bit. It just absolutely can't. So there you are. That's your two.